Hey all, Baruch Levi, B here from Soul Centered. Welcome to the Defiant Spirit. The Defiant Spirit is my podcast, both on YouTube and on all the podcast platforms around all things Viktor Frankl, author of Man's Search for Meaning, father of logotherapy, meaning-centered psychotherapy. I am a logotherapist and student of Dr. Frankl's, together with Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, and other spiritual mystical traditions. And right now, my primary focus is bringing Dr. Frankl to the world of the Enneagram. If you don't know the Enneagram, it's an ancient personality typing system that really was kind of brought to life about 50 years ago here in America, in the West, and adapted to psychological personality testing systems, and really brings that ancient wisdom together with modern technique. And it is the single best roadmap I have found for translating the work of Dr. Frankl into real life. And that work is around living a meaning-centered, purpose-driven life. Well, how do you do it? The Enneagram has been a proven pathway for me for many years, but over the past 3-4 years in particular, I've really turned to it personally and professionally. And now I've created the Defiant Spirit, Defy Your Number Enneagram system. So I'm excited. There's a new program for you to purchase and download over at mysoulcentered.org, or you can Google defiantspirit.org. You can check out the Defy Your Number starter program. It's all web-based with videos, and it's there for you to learn to discover your Enneagram number. There's a free test that you can take, though you don't need to. I also have some complimentary videos. Regardless of whether or not you purchase the test, you can discover your number simply by watching a couple videos, 9 videos, and picking out your number, or you can take the test. And it's fun because I started it as a real life fun scenario. 9 Enneagram numbers, walk into a bar, and you'll take it from there. But it is a serious system as well as a fun and playful system. So I want to talk to you today about some basic concepts in the Enneagram system and how it relates to you in your life around what's called the instincts, the basic instincts. I think of the basic instincts as our kind of primal drive. And we're going to talk about, there are many of them, but the Enneagram focus on these 3 primary ones. Most of the Enneagram system, all the Enneagram system, is built on triads, 3s. I won't go into it now. The power of 3s in nature, in science, in religion, in literature. I mean, everywhere you turn, there are 3s. And again, not going down that path right now, but the instincts are part of the triad system. And so there are 3 basic instincts. We're going to talk about them as they relate to you and your life. Lately, just so you know where I'm at, what I'm doing, I've been translating my Defy Your Number system, Enneagram system, into seeing it through different lenses. And one of the lenses I'm focused on right now is money, wealth. I'm passionately interested about money, not just making it and having it, but how it functions as a litmus test for our values, for our life energy. When I counsel clients, I would say 10% to 20% of our conversation somehow involves money related issues. Maybe not directly, maybe it's about profession, maybe it's about your home, your family, whatever it might be, your future. Money is part and parcel of our life. And so thinking about it as, well, what we call it is a means. Well, I'm doing this on my own and with the partnership and guidance of financial expert and my good friend, Michael Feiner of Feiner Wealth Management. So we're adapting this Enneagram system that I've created through seeing it through the lens of finances. So stay tuned for that. Very excited to be sharing that. And Michael and I have done a few podcasts, Money and Soul podcasts, which you can find over at the Soul Centered website as well. But right now, we're not talking about money, though it does relate to money. We're talking about these instincts. Now, these instincts are They're not conscious. These are not things you choose. I mean, that's by definition what an instinct is. It's a autopilot. It's a default where you go when you are not conscious, when you are not choosing. And that's my belief about the Enneagram. It's misunderstood. There's many great systems out there, but there's a lot of garbage too. It's got a lot of crap around it, as all popular self-help, and I don't believe it's a self-help system as kind of modern philosophies and pop psychologies go. This has a lot of crap around it. Now there's a lot of great teachers and great systems, but I really bring to it and see it through the lens of Dr. Frankl. Now Dr. Frankl, as far as I know, never formally engaged or talked about the Enneagram, and he would disapprove of it, as it oftentimes is taught, which is, this is a typing system, this is your number, this is who you are. That is the antithesis of what Dr. Frankl taught. He taught that we are never a number. I mean, this is a man who survived the Holocaust, watched millions of human beings reduced to numbers, reduced to ashes, treated as less than humans. So God forbid you walk away from the Enneagram and my approach on it, thinking I am an Enneagram 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There are 9 types. That is not the point of the Enneagram. That is not what it's about. And that is not the defy your number approach. In fact, it's the opposite. The Enneagram, as I teach it through this lens of Frankl, is you are not a number. You are never a number unless you are unconscious, unless you have forfeited your ability, your power to choose your response to life. That's really what the Enneagram is all about, is showing us where we go unconscious, where we go when we're in fear, when we're on autopilot, when we get into that animal-based nature of us. The Kabbalah talks about it as a nefesh behemi, the animal kind of, not spirit. Well, I mean, it could be spirit, but it's more about animal life force. That's how you would translate it. So we have this animal life force. It's no different than your dog or your cat or your cow or whatever pets you have. We're no different than animals when we are unconscious, when we are just going through the motions. But we have the power of the human spirit. And Dr. Frankl talks about the defiant power of the human spirit. And, you don't have to be a spirit if that invokes for you kind of woo-woo. It can be true self, something eternal, something transcendent that goes beyond body and physical, material, space, time, whatever. There's a true you. Well, that true you can only be true when you are conscious, when you are choosing, when you have come off of autopilot. So the 3 instincts are 3 primary ways, not the only ways, we go on to autopilot. And again, we don't choose, we are just wired this way. Maybe there's 1,000 reasons how we developed it, but we developed one dominant instinct. Each of us has one. So I want to walk through the instincts and talk to you a little bit about kind of just an overview of them and how they might relate to your life. We'll do a deeper dive another time. I want to reserve that right to revisit this, maybe going through each one systematically, but and I will be doing that in my follow-up online program, the mastery level program. This first one, I touch upon the instincts, but I don't do a deep dive because there's so much information in the Enneagram that sometimes it's over presented, as if all of it is essential when it's not. There are essentials, there are kind of next level, there are advanced. I would say the basic concept of this is a basic concept, but going deeper into it really is sort of next level. So I'll give you a basic overview of the 3 instincts. Now, again, these are defaults. They're not conscious, but you do have a dominant instinct. So there is self-preservation. I'm just reading here for those of you who are on podcast. I have slides for these. I will make them available to you. But if you're watching on video, you can see them. So self-preservation is what it sounds like. It is the instinct to stay alive, to self-preserve. It's really kind of a go-to within you. We all have it, again. But for some of us, it's dominance, the first line of defense, the first place our mental, emotional, instinctual, attention resources are directed to. So self-preservation redirects us when we're in reaction. This is my Frankel language. There's either reaction when you're unconscious, or there's response when you're conscious. And those two things are mutually exclusive. You can't be reactive and responsive at the same time. The entire work of what we're here to do, I believe the entire work of the Enneagram, is to get us out of reaction and into our power to choose our response, Frankel's language. And so when we are unconscious as self-preservation, we go straight to all the things around us and within us that would lead to our self-preservation. So here it says physical needs, basic food, shelter, finance, family, just core stuff. So that's self-preservation. We'll unpack it in a second. The other one of the three is sexual. Now, this one is sometimes called one-to-one for obvious reasons, because even sophisticated adults kind of do a sexual. What? Either they wake up and they say, I was zoning out, B, like, what are you saying now? Or they kind of get giggly and goofy and I'm not sexual, or my dad's a sexual, like, ooh, that's weird. But sexual is a much more primal function. I mean, think about what sex is. I don't have to tell you, this is not biology 101, but I guess it sort of is. It's to propagate, to perpetuate the species. So there's a primal need in us to perpetuate our self. Now, it can be biological, physiological, having children. It doesn't have to be. There's in every one of us a desire to perpetuate our ideals, our values, our just life force, our life energy. Well, this, sometimes is called intimacy. Sometimes it's called one-to-one in more kind of secular businessy settings. But at the end of the day, I think we can handle sexual as this intensity. And that's how it really it comes across. So it doesn't have to be about sex. I'm a sexual 8. And that just means that my 8, and listen to other podcasts about what the 8 really is, which is already an intense type, gets funneled or focused or channeled through this intensification called sexual energy. If I was self-pres, that 8 would be a little more muted and redirected to kind of the basic needs. For me, it gets redirected towards a person, a one-on-one connection. Again, it can just be coffee, platonic. I reserve my intimacy for my wife, but that sexual energy goes into my work, comes across in the way I speak. Oftentimes I'm told I speak too fast, too intense, too much information. That's sexual. It's like a fire hose, right, of information or of intensity. Self-preservation is more of a garden hose. So they're just different levels of intensity. We'll get more into it. And last but not least, social. Social is sometimes it's presented as second, but I present it in sort of the order of evolution, because social is really the most recent, as in 50,000 years recent of evolution. It is the herd. It is the group, the community. It can be your family of 2, which is a collective. So it's not so much about the person, the one-on-one, which is the sexual. It's more of the collective, the dynamic, the family, again, 2 or more, community, your church, synagogue, your fraternal organization, your city, your community. I said that your country, like all of these are different social networks, and a social oriented instinct will sort of will gravitate towards the collective, seeing their place within the herd. It isn't that they're social per se. Sexual or self-pres can be social as in the way we engage and interact. That's not dependent on your instinct. It can amplify it, it can inform it, but that's not really what this means. This means when you see a school of fish swimming, right? It isn't that they're magnanimous or self-transcendent. It's that that's how they survive, by being a part of that school can, fend off sharks. So, or, the picture I think in there that I have is pretty small, is a flock of birds. And that flock, I live here in Denver, and just a lot of nature. We'll be out in nature, and I'll see these beautiful bird formations, flock formations, and they're usually in V's, I think, because it's aerodynamic, and they're drafting off one another, and the one in the lead is taking more of the brunt, and then they switch, and it goes back to the rear, and then the one in behind it moves up to take more of the brunt, and so they can go farther, go longer. They are surviving as a collective. So these are three primal instincts. Let's just go through in the remaining few minutes that we have together. This is not a master class. This is an introduction to get you interested and understand how the Enneagram can be so guiding for you, because most of the time we think of it as just the 9 numbers, the 9 types, which I often talk about, but each one of those 9 types is infused with one of these 3 instincts. So in Enneagram 8, I use myself as an example. Sexual looks very different than self-pres, looks very different than social, self-preservation, sexual, social. 3 types of 8. Well, do the math. There's 3 of these for each type. Therefore, there are really 27 types. You're like, oh man, just starting to wrap my head around the 9 types. You don't need to worry about it. There's still ballpark. Think of it as, like 8 is football, and 9 is badminton, and 1 is, I don't know, curling. Seems like a one sport. Now I can only speak about football. I don't know anything about badminton or curling, but although I passed the curling center, which is in Colorado Springs, I didn't know that was here. So I digress. Enneagram 8, football. Well, like you have your West Coast offense, you have your traditional running game, the I formation. I'm from Nebraska, and I know some of you, this is Greek, but they're still football. They're just different styles of football. Self-pres, sexual, social are different styles or vibes or focuses of the 8, of the 9, of the 1. So you just need to know for now which game you play, 8, 9, 1, 2, 3, etc. This can start to help inform you, especially when you don't fully resonate with your type. So for instance, an Enneagram 9, which is oftentimes described as kind of the least active, well, a social 9 is one of the most active because it's a counter type. It doesn't look like the other 9s because that social kicks into overdrive. And a lot of reasons why. You don't need to know it now, but this can help explain sometimes why your Enneagram type doesn't exactly feel like the right pair of shoes. Once you understand your instinct, that begins to formulate an understanding of the subtype, which maybe will click into an aha. So I'm a 9, but I'm not a typical 9. Okay, self-preservation. Again, this is the easiest one sort of to wrap our heads around, just because it's a great description. Sometimes the descriptions in the Enneagram suck, and they just send us mentally down the wrong path, like the passion, right? That's a kind of a fundamental emotional reaction to things. And in our world today, passion sounds great. Like, he's so passionate, but really what they mean in the system is passion coming from the Latin pate, which means suffering. So it's how we suffer and how we cause suffering. So these words sometimes either are ancient or archaic or just kind of lost on us, but self-preservation is not. It's very clear. I think I spelled preservation wrong. Preservation. Oh, I think that's right. Terrible spell. Okay, so it is a self-referencing energy. It doesn't mean you're selfish. It means if I stick my hand on the stove and it's hot, my attention goes to me. Am I okay? Of course, we all have that, but self-preservation's default will be in all kinds of settings. Am I okay? As an aside, what's interesting about the instincts is that, well, many things that are interesting, but one of them is that, we're carrying wiring within us that we don't fully need anymore. I mean, the picture here is a caveman hunting a woolly mammoth, and we still have the same wiring as that caveman, but we don't necessarily have the woolly mammoth, not nearly the vulnerability and the Yeah, the need for self-preservation, exactly like we did 50,000 years ago, but we still have the wiring. So it kicks in even if it may be uncalled for. Nonetheless, it takes us to me. And so some of us have this go-to, am I okay? Ariella, my wife, is self-pres, and she is far more likely to focus on her well-being than I am. Um, I am somewhat self-preservation repressed. We'll talk about that another time, but these are stacked. So you have number one, number two, number three. Pole position is your dominant one, and that's all we're focusing on right now. So her pole position, her first place is self-preservation. My It's split for me. I kind of social self-preservation, but sometimes it feels like self-preservation is the last place, and it's the last thing I put my attention on. Well, Ariella will put her attention on her health. She's got like, don't tell her I said this. She's got like 50,000 vitamins and supplements and whatever. But I noticed this about self-pres. They really take nutrition health seriously. Now, you can be self-preservation and do the opposite and not take it seriously. You can go the opposite way and react or rebel against it. More often than not, though, somebody who's self-preservation is going to be tending to their physical well-being, certainly other people's. I mean, she will then go to her social and look at the collective's self-preservation. So making sure all our kids are taking their vitamins, and they fake it, and then they, throw them in the garbage or bury them under their food or whatever. But we all humor her, and we honor her self-preservation. Actually, two of my children are definitely self-preservation, and they take, her advice and her direction very seriously on the supplements. And one or two of the others, along with me, I'm a bad example, just don't. I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just not my go-to. And I will take whatever she puts in front of me. I sound like I'm 10 or 5. But, when I'm sick, she'll put stuff in my hand and say, take this. And I'm like, is this legal? Like, it looks like you just smuggled it across the border. But it's all legal. Don't worry. So body, health, wellness, physical, ability, they're probably more likely than not to have a health club membership. Whereas, and sexual might, but for different reasons. Physical safety, I see it with self-pres. They're the ones who kind of notice what's safe or not safe in an environment, in the room. Where's the safety exit? Now that could be an Enneagram 6 because they're very much oriented towards safety and security. So I know when somebody really focuses on safety, security, they're either a 6, maybe a 1, but probably self-preservation. You can be self-preservation in any type. So that isn't a giveaway as to your type, but it probably is a giveaway to your basic instinct. Where do you orient your attention immediately? Again, we have all these in us. Material comfort. It's not just, it is basic needs, food, shelter, but then there's a comfort level. Like I see it with Shoshana, my daughter, who's a self-preservation 9. And I see the way she relates to Netflix or her phone. There's a comfort. It's like a blankie. It's like a pacifier almost. You can feel with self-preservation when they've found their thing, their safe space, their go-to. Maybe it's a book. I see it with my my stepfather, who uses his books sort of in that self-preservation comforting way. It's hard to explain, but and self-pres will almost lose themselves, like merging. That's a 9 thing, but it's also a self-preservation thing to really become one with that experience or environment. Again, unconsciously, that's not a great thing. It can be fine, but if you're doing anything in reaction, you're not in the driver's seat. You don't have power. So really thinking about self-preservation and the ways that we seek out comfort and security and safety. Independence, that's another big one. The self-preservation really pushes them towards autonomy, not having to be reliant. Now, it doesn't mean they're not. It just means it brings up a certain level of fear to feel like you aren't, the one responsible for bringing home the kill, for bringing home the, not, maybe it's breadwinner, but, more than that, it's the vulnerability of not being able to hunt. You watch one of those, post-apocalyptic TV shows, and when all of the the world goes off the grid and we have to hunt for our own food, right? That's when a self-pres thinks, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. So this need for self-sufficiency, but even deeper than that, it's more of a freedom, of an autonomy. 8, 9, and 1, which are all the instinctual types, really revere autonomy and freedom more than the other types, and self-pres as well. So you don't have to be an 8, 9, 1, but that self-pres is really all about wanting or needing autonomy, freedom. And we'll come back to another time what happens when you repress these, when it's in last place, which is a different vibe. So conservation, self-preservation really pushes us towards conservation. It can mean the environment, but it's more of conserving, right? In the deeper sense, conserving your energy. So they'll appear less intense than a sexual for sure. Conserving money, a little more conservative with the small c and how they spend, not necessarily frugal, but can be, and just more conscientious of it. And it's a go-to. It's not necessarily how it plays out, but certainly how it starts in reaction. And lastly, just survival. I hear a lot with self-pres types, lots of language and talk about survival. There might be a greater fear of death, certainly of one's own death, maybe versus a social, which might be a fear of the death of a loved one. Doesn't mean you don't fear the death of a loved one. It just, again, means like more energy and allocation of resources towards something like death. Or it could be, we prepare better, we prepare more. Maybe listen to my podcast with Jamie Sarche, The Death Whisperer. I bet self-preservation is more likely than sexual to prepare for their end of life needs. Okay, in the few remaining minutes we have, I'm going to wrap up with sexual and social. So sexual is about you and an other. Now, the other can be a person, and it can be sex, it can be romance and that type of energy, but it can be coffee and losing yourself in conversation. I know when I'm with a sexual instinct person, because we'll lose ourselves in conversation. I'll feed off their energy, they'll feed off mine. It isn't a one-way street, it's a two-way street, and you create synergy and there's an intensity. I know this has happened with me and my brother-in-law as an example. He's a sexual 7 entrepreneur and I'm a sexual 8 entrepreneur. And we would just go down the rabbit hole of intensity. We look up and it's like an hour later when we've just been talking about our latest venture. Or it can be an experience. So sexual types will merge, just become one with a person or an experience. So I get this way when I'm creating these slides, or can be something as benign as a jigsaw puzzle. I'll just get intense with it, and there's this, just gotta feel the juice of the experience. That's a sexual energy. We don't often think of it as sexual because we've limited to sex to physical, but it's more than that. It's an energy and intensity. So it's all about connection, making that connection, bridging the gap between you and the other, and really, really just getting into that sync, that rhythm, that oneness. It comes from this deep place of kind of genetic survival. We don't even think about it, but I want to defy death. I want to perpetuate this idea. I mean, it excites me to be sharing these ideas with you, and you're receiving them and you're feeling it and you're making it your own, and it's impacting and shaping your life, and then you share it with somebody else, and so on and so forth. That's a kind of a defiant act. Sexual, and defiance, this kind of word goes hand in hand. Again, intensity of experience, of relationship, of life. Sexual types can burn you out. They can burn themselves out. They probably are the most likely to be the overworkers, the workaholics, burnout. So lots of shadow with self-pres, with sexual, with all instincts. All of this can be shadow stuff if you're in reaction, if you're not harnessing it, if it's driving you and you're not driving it. Longing for this intimacy, this depth of connection, more of the same thing. And like the picture shows, it's also about aggression. It's back in the Sahara, fighting for the mate, attracting the mate. You look at some animals that are just sexual in nature, like a peacock, right? Peacock just makes that noise to call out its mates or scare away the predators. It has those ornate colors, totally unnecessary. Sexual energy in some ways is totally unnecessary from a purely physiological evolutionary perspective, except that it makes that peacock stand out, that mane of the lion stand out, and perpetuates itself through that intensity. So some animals are much more kind of sexual in explicit nature, and we think about them that way, that intensity, that aggression, to take fight, not flight. That would be more of the self-preservation, and protect and win at all costs. And this, can come across as very aggressive and problematic. All right, so hitting my half-hour mark, and that's usually when people's eyes start to glaze over, or your jog is about to end. So let's wrap up with social, self-pres, sexual, and last but not least, social. Social is we. So if self-pres is me and sexual is kind of you or other, then social is we. It isn't that they're more magnanimous. It's that it's a survival technique to just take stock of, is my family okay, right? As some people just can't function who are social dominant when their loved ones aren't in the nest, right? Or aren't accounted for, or it could be the organization or the community. Right now is a time of unrest, agitation in our society. And I think for social type people, it's either shaking them up or it's calling out to them to step up, to step in, to shape society. So it's about forming bonds. Social instinct really means you have a greater ease at reading the group, at sensing power structure, right? Social will walk into a room and be able to size up the dynamics probably quicker than self-pres, who's focused on the thermostat, or sexual, who's focused on the mates or the predators, the competition. So social is much more sophisticated. It's more of a sophisticated evolutionary tactic, to utilize the group. That's how we've survived as a species, not the lone cave woman, but the collective that can operate successfully, which is a very challenging instinct to master. It really is. If you're socially challenged, I would argue it's one of the hardest, probably the hardest one to really help somebody who has a low social intelligence ascend that ladder. You've seen them, you know them, maybe you are one. It's just not easy to navigate in a very social society now that's online, which is a whole new dynamic of social. But it's really thinking about the collective and coordinating the collective, or your place within the hierarchy of norms and standards. It's also about meaning. There's a deeper level to it, because as Dr. Frankl talks about, meaning really is only possible when you transcend yourself. Maslow, Frankl said, was wrong, that self-transcendence, not self-actualization, is the pinnacle. When we get beyond ourselves is when we achieve true meaning and purpose in this lifetime. So really driven by a sense of meaning and purpose. And when there's an absence of it as an organization or as a family, as an individual, it's, like sucking the oxygen out of your veins. And there's a basic reaction when there's a threat to the group, to the herd, to your place within it. And so constantly surveying the land for kind of doing sort of threat SWOT analysis at a collective level. We're all doing this. Self-pres is doing it, me. Sexual is doing it out of kind of you or other, and social is doing it out of we. But these are just cursory, high-level ideas around these three instincts. But the point is, you have one dominant. So my challenge to you is think about the three that I just described. You can look at the slides to jog your memory, or you can jump over to my program, Defy Your Number, and I'll help you kind of locate your dominant type. Also start to think about, well, which one is repressed? Which one do I have the hardest time accessing? And lot more directions we can go down that path. But the bottom line is, this gives you hopefully a good vibe, good feeling of these basic instincts, so that you can stop reacting, because that's what this is all about, and start responding. This is not about adding another number or set of thou shalls, thou shall nots, have tos, do's, don'ts to your life. This is about taking back the power to choose your response to your circumstances. And one of the ways you can do that is by learning your instinct, harnessing it, and making it serve you. Jump over to defiantspirit.org. Until the next time, defy your number, live your spirit, your true self, your essence, and I will see you in the next video. Shalom, salam, namaste, and peace.